How's it going, everyone? So, before we dive into the episode, I really want to say thank you to everyone that is listening in, that's tuning in, that's enjoying this content and getting value from it. I really love that. That's why I do it. But there's a huge amount of you that are listening that are not subscribed, not following the podcast. And I really want to encourage you to please follow and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are listening or viewing this on. It really helps out the podcast. It helps out the algorithm. It helps more people hear this content that you already find helpful and that they hopefully will as well. So if you go ahead and subscribe or follow the podcast on any platform that you're listening on, and please share it with your friends, that'll be great. All right. Thanks, everyone. Let's get into the episode. And it's great to get you on the podcast. We've been in communication for, probably a year or so, right?
Yep.
Been trying to get you on for a while now, but I'm really excited for our conversation.
Me too. Glad to be on the show. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Ron, before we go down, the path of you creating Hacker Valley with Chris as well, tell me about how you got your start in security, in cybersecurity overall, right? Because it's not it's I always think of it as a path that's kind of off the beaten path, right, of IT, right? When you think about going into IT, you think system engineering, you think network engineering, you think maybe even developer, right? Security is typically like that distant thought that no one really thinks about. So how did you decide to go down this path?
I had two starts in the space of security. The first start was when I was probably around 13. I got hacked on AOL Instant Messenger. Someone sent me a direct message after talking crap in a chat room. I was probably talking about who's a better player, Kobe or Shaq. Well, I must have said something to someone that they did not like. So they sent me a file. All of a sudden, my CD-ROM drive starts opening and closing, and my computer turns into like matrix-like text. And, I freak out a little bit because this is a family computer. So I'm like, I need to figure out what happened. One, so I can get it to stop doing that. And then two, so I can figure out how to do that to all my friends. Luckily, and I'm kind of crazily enough, the person told me exactly how they did it. They were using this program called ProRat. Shout out to anybody that knows that tool. That was my first somewhat of a start, my first taste. And then my real introduction to the space of cybersecurity was I was working at a public access channel back in Maryland, where I'm from. And I would go and film high school games and nursing homes and do interviews with people in the county. And on Sundays, we would have anyone that wanted to come in to use the studio. We would record, film, produce, and even air whatever they wanted to, record with us. So there was this gentleman that walks in. His name is Marcus Carey. He walks in with these few other gentlemen, and they see me reading a book on computer network. I'm reading a Cisco book. And Marcus looks at me, he says, "Hey, cool, you want to be in computer networking?" And I told him, "No, I'm a hacker." And he thought it was hilarious. This 16, 17-year-old kid that, thought he was a hacker, and he definitely wasn't. But he asked me a few Linux commands, and, I knew the commands. He was like, "Hey, how do you change a directory? How do you do ping? What does ping do?" And he saw the potential. He said, "Hey, if you want to work in this space, you can. And if you want to do it without a degree, here's exactly how." I'm extremely well with following instructions. I feel like you have to be in the game of cybersecurity. So I took his mentorship, and at 19 got my start at Booz Allen Hamilton, being a contractor for the NSA.
Wow, that is. It almost sounds like that's going straight into the deep end, right? I mean, at 19, man, I could not have handled anything close to that. Not anything close to that. No way.
Yeah.
How was that? Did you okay, so looking back on it, you obviously know like, hey, that's a crazy situation for a 19-year-old to be in. But, you know, when you were in it, were you saying this is too much? This is, drinking from the fire hose times 10? Or were you just, approaching it from a different way? What was your mentality with that?
My parents are not, college graduates, so we didn't necessarily have like a mentality of like, this is a path. Like you start here and then you go to school and then you do this thing. So I've been used to people saying things that I don't know my entire life. You start in school, you don't know what all of these words or formulas or acronyms mean. When I got into cybersecurity, it was the same thing. People would speak at me, and I would nod and smile and just hope that I could figure out what they mean over time. And when I first got started my professional career, working at Booz Allen, there was a lot of acronyms, especially because I was working with military people or people that was former military, and they had all the acronyms. So I had the technology and cybersecurity acronyms, but then these other acronyms as well. But I was just patient. It didn't really bother me. I was excited because at Booz Allen, I think I asked for 40,000. I was like, hey, if I get 40,000, they looked at me, and the recruiter smiled. She said, how about 65? So you offer a 19-year-old $65,000. He's gonna do exactly, the 19-year-old will do whatever. Getting 20 an hour at 19. This was back in 2010.
Yeah.
Getting 19, $20 an hour back then was already gold, but this was like 45, 50 an hour. There was nothing that I wouldn't do.
Yeah. Yeah. That's that like really hits home. I remember when someone like offered me 20 an hour, right? In college. This was probably 2011, right?
Yep.
And someone offered me 20 an hour to just like install a couple programs on a bunch of schools in Chicago. Like, what? You're gonna, yeah, I guess I'll do it for that. And he was
Yeah.
like apprehensive of offering me, that low of a number, right? He was like, oh, this kid's gonna ask for, 40, 50 an hour. And I'm sitting here like 20. My God, I'm over here like making $7 in the school bookstore a couple years ago. Like, yeah, let's do this. It's it's a fascinating mentality shift, and now it's like the total opposite for me, right? I went from being totally okay, complacent, and happy with $20 an hour. Obviously, I have more expenses now, and life
Yeah.
gets. But like
Right.
when companies, I guess, undershoot me or underoffer me for a position that I know what the market is for, it's like almost insulting.
Yep. For sure. And what I loved about Marcus, and I had another great mentor who helped get me this job at Booz Allen Hamilton. His name was Chad Price. Marcus, Chad, and even the recruiter there, they all understood equity, not just like monetary equity, but fairness, providing equality within the realm of within the professional space. And I'll always remember, that kind gesture. They could have said, hey, here's 40,000, here's even 45, but everyone on the team was probably making like 75 to 100,000 that were in entry level. So them to like look at me and say, hey, this kid, he's 19, they knew it because it's on my job application, and to still show love like that, it meant a lot.
You know, do you think that that was unique to that time period, even for you to get that opportunity? Because I feel like today, and maybe I'm completely wrong, but I feel like today they wouldn't even look at you really. I mean, like at 19, you have to basically like, be convicted of hacking, right? And sign some deal with the FBI for you to get your name out there for them to even look at you, I feel. Is that accurate or maybe not?
We want the youth to succeed. I think it's powerful to see a young person hungry and motivated and also good at following instructions. I think it really comes down to the person. But there was this 17-year-old that I met last year. He reached out to me on LinkedIn. His name was Sully Vickers. He's probably, if you look up Sully on LinkedIn, he's doing amazing work. He brought cybersecurity programs and a cybersecurity club to his school. But he reached out to me, said, hey, let's sync up, and I want to just pick your brain. I see that you're very public on LinkedIn. This 17-year-old, somehow his network is amazing. He introduced me to someone that works at my company now, my producer. He met my producer because she was hosting a podcast for teens that wanted to learn about cryptography. And he said, hey, Ron, after our meeting, he was like, I think there's someone that you should meet. And her name is Jennifer Langdon. And that changed, meeting Jennifer changed Hacker Valley for the better. She's a great producer. She loves the space of cybersecurity. If someone is 16, 17, 18, 19, doesn't matter how old, I think we want to bet on the youth. If you're not betting on the youth, you're not looking at your future. I think that you can break into cybersecurity at such a young age, but you have to have that hunger has to exude out of you. It has to almost be like, I can't let this young person go because I know that the impact that they'll make. When you're young, you have no problem working on someone else's schedule. Like when I was being mentored by Marcus, he said, meet me at the coffee shop at this time on Saturday. I don't got anything going on. I can meet you. You want me to meet 9 a.m. as long as it's not 6, because teens can't wake up early. Anytime past 9 and beyond, I'm wide open. And I think if the young people today just show that that they have the aptitude by being curious and showing your work, showing your ability to learn, you can go so far.
Yeah, that's so true. It's not always easy. It's not always going to be like a direct, straightforward path, right? But when you really want something and you go after it, I would say most of the time, you're going to hit it, right? You're going
Hmm.
to get it. And if you don't, you're going to get something so close, you know, that it's going to, make sense, right? Like I'll give you an example. For a long time, I wanted to go into federal law enforcement, right? Like you just said that you did some contract work with the NSA. The
Hmm.
NSA in my 20s, if they were to hit me up and be like, hey, we want to send you to like, the deepest, darkest hole of the earth, and you're going to be there for, a year, you're not going to talk to anyone or anything like that. Like, sign me up, man. Tell me
Exactly.
where I'm like, you don't even need to tell me where I'm going, right? Like, you don't even have to park the plane. You can fly over the thing, kick me out, and I'll be fine, that was that was my dream. That was everything to me. And I tried that for years to get into any agency that would take me. And for some reason, right, it just never worked out. But I found my way into cybersecurity. And not that I do work with the government or anything like that. I don't. Not in any way, right? It would be a lot cooler if I did. But I still get to have that mentality. I still get to exercise that mentality, right? And I went down a completely different path. I shot for the stars. I shot for one star,
Hmm.
right? And I landed amongst the stars. And now I'm able to, kind of talk to former people that were in the agency like yourself and, you know, explore these different topics. And it's a really fascinating path that my life has taken, right? I feel like when I wanted to go into the agency, I probably wasn't ready for that level of maturity that I would have needed. Now that I am at that level of maturity, I am also mature enough to say, I don't think I want to risk my life. I have a 1 year old at home,
Yeah. Yep.
right? Going to Afghanistan is probably not a good idea for a white male, that obviously looks like he's working for the agency, like all that sort of stuff. In my 20s, you want me to go to Afghanistan? Let's go, man. We're going to party. Like,
Exactly. Yep. And you know what? When you want something and you set an intention and you speak it out loud, the universe will conspire and help you to get there. So what I did was I exposed myself. I told people what I wanted. It was completely embarrassing. Some people laughed at me. Some people thought I was crazy. All of my classmates, they thought I was ridiculous for putting on my senior yearbook that I wanted to work in information assurance. What does that even mean? I didn't even know what that meant, but Marcus did it. And I was like, I think that Marcus is doing offensive operations. I think he's breaking into systems. So if he's doing that, that's what I'm doing. And I just put it out there. And, even from day one when I met him, he said, do you want to do computer networking? And I told him my intention. No, I'm a hacker. I think that's so powerful, especially when you just have that conviction and you speak it, things will start to happen.
yeah, and I feel like the universe, gives you those little tests, right? It's kind of like looking back, it's like those little minute tests along the way where, you said that some people like that actually laughed at you. I experienced that too. I was in IT and I knew I wanted to get into security and I was doing everything I possibly could to get into security, just a security dedicated role. And the countless times. I mean, almost every day for a year or two, I would get on the call with someone and they'd laugh at me. Like, yeah, that's not going to happen. You don't know enough of this, networking. You don't know enough of this
Mhm.
system engineering stuff, right? Like, you're too young. You're not going to make it. All that sort of stuff. And what they didn't realize is how my brain works, you know, especially from being a wrestler, right? In high school, I tell people like wrestling, it just like restructures your brain, especially when you're that young, where it's like, if you give me a hint of a challenge, just a hint of your own doubt in me, or a hint of a challenge like that, it's game on. Like I'm doing it. You don't understand, the fire that you just lit in me, and that's your own fault, right? Like I'm doing this thing, It's it's fascinating how that works out. So, when you're at the agency, when you're working for Booz Allen, what does what does your specialty look like when you're that young, when you're that, I guess, inexperienced even, right? What does your specialty look like? Are you a jack of all trades? Are they putting you through a rigorous training program? What is that?
Yeah, so when I was working at Booz Allen, they bring people in, well, at least at that point. I'm sure they still, I think a different company has a contract now, but we were brought in by the NSA, and it was really cool because when they first hired me, I didn't have my security clearance. So I had to go to the beach, is what they called it. It was like where you go and wait for your security clearance. They had so many roles open that the government wanted them to fill, that they were willing to pay people to just sit around and wait while they got their clearance. So on average, it would take about 3 months to a year. For some people, it took 2 years. There were people sitting in this like office space for 2 years, and they could do whatever they want. I did some research on certifications, and I was like, okay, I need to get a few more, obviously, so I could have an opportunity to make more in the government space, because they pay for, if you have a degree, if you have certain certs. And I saw that the CompTIA certs were going to start to have an expiration date. So right before that cutoff, I was like, okay, I'm going to get all the CompTIAs I could possibly get. So I got the Network Plus, Security Plus, Convergence Plus, and got all those certs, got my CEH as well, and really focused on myself until I got my clearance. After I got cleared, they brought me into the NSA, and I got read on. I got to my role was doing offensive ops, so I was supposed to pretty much be APT for the United States government, and they hired me to be a subject matter expert. And I don't know if I was an expert. There's a lot of people that have imposter syndrome. I have a bone to pick with that terminology. It's someone that pretends to be something or someone that they're not. They told me I'm an expert. So why would I fight that? If they told me I'm an expert and they're happy with my quality of work, and so be it. There is definitely a certain level of humility that I had, but I think that, imposter syndrome isn't actually what people actually have. They have humility. Like, I'm humbled to be around all these very smart people. And, I'm a sponge. I am also very good at following instruction. I mentioned that earlier. So they told me exactly how to get good at my job. Here's how you train to get better at what you do. So I just did those things and took my time, and it was a lot of fun. It was probably not the best job to have as your first professional gig, doing offensive ops, because that's something that people dream of. And I did dream of it. But after about 3.5 years, I was like, okay, I can only break into so many things before wanting to know more about how to fix it and, mitigate these types of events.
Yeah, you bring up two critical things, that you were a sponge, and that, you're very good at following directions. And those are two critical things that I also was told and learned very early on in my career. And I still tell everyone, that wants to break in, that ask me, that's how you need to be. You need to have that mentality of just being a sponge,
Mhm.
just being happy that you're hanging around these people that are so much more, smarter and skilled than you, and try to learn as much as you possibly can without getting in their way too much. Following directions, it's interesting, right? So when earlier on in my career, when I was working for a company, we had not too robust of troubleshooting guys and upgrade guys and things like that. And I still, to this day, I have a knack for finding the most random issues that you can imagine. I mean, like Google does not help you. with these issues, like I have to go talk to the developer and the developer has to say like it's not supposed to work like that. I mean, the craziest stuff, right?
Mhm.
And so I ended up creating really verbose documentation for troubleshooting that's still actually used at that company. And I haven't worked there in almost 10 years, right? And recently, right, I took on a new task, a developer related task at my day job. And they said, oh, yeah, everything's in this document. It's foolproof. You can literally just read it and go through it, follow it word for word, and you're good. Like, okay, well, I'm great at following direction. So if you literally tell me to do something, I am going to do exactly that. If you don't tell me to click somewhere, I'm not clicking it because I don't, I don't know. Right.
Mhm.
Like in that first learning position, right? If you made a mistake, it wasn't like, we'll revert to a backup. It was like it was a big deal. Like you were probably gonna get fired.
That's right.
And so I don't click things that I'm not supposed to. I don't hit enter when I'm not supposed to. And I'm going through this document, and I mean every paragraph I'm finding like you guys missed 7 steps here, right? That I'm supposed to do. And it took me 2 weeks to do something that would have taken, anyone else on the team, a day to do. And at the end of the 2 weeks, like I didn't even complete it. I just said to him like, "Look, this is too far behind. Can someone else just do it? It's probably 30 minutes for everyone else. Me following this documentation is not working." And through that, they said, "Maybe we need to rewrite this thing."
Mhm.
Like when I write documentation, it's always with the mindset of if someone that knows nothing has to sit in this desk and do this task, what do they need to know? Absolutely everything, every step of the way. Actually, working with a federal agency earlier on in my career, I went down this rabbit hole and I kind of saw it firsthand for how they take notes because they take notes as if, like, if the world blows up and there's one person left that needs to set up this thing and they don't know anything about it, what do they need to know? Right. And they took my 20 step upgrade guide and turned that into 250 steps. And I'm sitting here like, man, they take notes at a totally different level.
Right. Yeah, and it's important to, be able to follow instructions in cyber. One, because today there is a lot of documentation and there's something called best practices. When we don't follow them, sometimes you get popped. But at the same time, it also has to be a level of creativity because, as you're mentioning, when you follow the directions of someone or even documentation, it might not work because we change, technology changes, there's shifts or better ways to do things. So even though I was very good at following instructions, I've always had like a little bit of a creative side to figure out not only like, is this the best way for me, but is there a completely different way that I could do this that would make this the best for other people as well?
So when you're done at Booz Allen, where do you go from there? I mean, how do you scratch that itch after you start at that high of a level? How do you scratch that itch going forward?
I First off, we going back to the hiring young people, one thing I forgot to mention is I got a referral to work at Booz Allen Hamilton by, one of my mentors, Chad Price. He was my college professor. So I did one, like pretty much like half a semester at community college. And I was taking this information system security class. And he was a consultant at Booz Allen Hamilton. So we always had this fun banter in class because books get old very quickly, especially in cyber. So there would be some times where we download an application and it doesn't work. And I would be like, I already read this part of the book. Here's how we work through it. So we don't have to like spend the entire class troubleshooting and no one gets anywhere. So the gentleman, Chad Price, referred me. And through Booz Allen, like then it kind of like the thread started to be pulled for more friends. So I got introduced to someone at Booz Allen. His name is Marco Figueroa, a very close friend, very pivotal figure in my life and career. He was working at McAfee. He pivoted from Booz Allen and started working at McAfee. He was a great reverse engineer. And, if I wasn't hacking, I wanted to do like RE related things. So Marco reached out and said, hey, I got an opening at Booz Allen. Marco is this New Yorker, crazy swag, also very demanding. He said, Ron, I need you to show up at this place at 1 p.m. for your interview. I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. I'm going to tell you when to go inside and just be yourself. But here's the parameters until you're supposed to be yourself. And at this point, I'm 22. Like I did 3 years at Booz Allen, and now I was interviewing for McAfee. Good at following instructions, good at being creative. So I had an awesome, great opportunity to work at McAfee. We were contracting for the government in some cases, but my job was to be a security researcher, to find flaws in whatever I could dream of. So I started focusing on BGP, the protocol for internet routing, and trying to find flaws there. I didn't find anything. And then I started looking at Android applications and kind of like got very addicted to that and had some fun, doing not necessarily reverse engineering, but just like unpacking Android applications, looking at the source code and seeing if I could find any commonalities for how malicious Android apps have been behaving. And I had a little bit of a taste of data science. I got introduced to scikit-learn, and I had access to some very powerful devices at McAfee, because at this time, McAfee was owned by Intel. So we had, all the samples that we would collect from telemetry from people's devices and store them in a giant database. So I had access to like every binary that I could ever think of. And whenever I go to VirusTotal, I would, find a specific artifact in research or on VirusTotal, and I would type it into the McAfee database. There would always be that binary in the database. So I had a lot of great access, and yeah, got to just further my skills at McAfee from there.
Man, that is it's really fascinating. I guess that is probably the next logical jump, right? Going from offensive sec to R&D and kind of reverse engineering, the malware that you may have been launching, right,
Yep.
previously, or the holes that you were finding before. Well, let's find out why those holes exist.
Who else is doing them? Like, who else are using those same tactics, techniques, and protocol and procedures?
So that spurs the question for me, at least, right? When you talk about who is using them, how are you able to determine that, right? Because if they're using, the same piece of malware that we're using here in America, what would be different? Is it the delivery of that malware? Is it, all of the other work that they do ahead of time that you're kind of fingerprinting to who it is, or what does that look like?
I wish I had my adult brain back then, like my current brain, because if you look at MITRE ATT&CK, it's actually a nice chain to follow. Like there's discovery first, then there's trying to get initial access. Looking at the work that I was doing at McAfee, I was looking at, after someone has that initial exploitation, what kind of discovery are they doing? One of my tactics as an engineer in general, if I'm breaking into a physical building, I'm doing things like port scanning, and I don't want to get caught, so I might not do TCP. I'm going to look at what UDP protocols can I start to leverage. SNMP, Simple Networking Management Protocol, is a big one. So what I did when I got to McAfee was like, hey, let me see any Android apps that are using SNMP, because that's a telltale sign. Why is my Android device doing that? Unless I'm using it as I'm using a network management application. So I was able to find some applications. I was able to find some applications from like Eastern Europe as well. And then I started to just pull the thread, like, well, if they're doing this, then let me see what other people are doing with those same tactics. And I started to just like look for specific functions, because an Android app, you can look at the source code. So I started to see like, all right, the source code might be obfuscated, but the functions are always going to be the same. So if I have a variable, I might call it Ron IP address, and then it equals 192.168. But the string that I have, 192.168.1.1 or whatever it may be, has methods, dot split, dot find, dot strip. So I would look for people using methods in a specific way, and I will start to catalog them. And then I was able to find some similarities between specific malware variants on Android by just looking at almost like doing source code audits.
Wow, that's really fascinating. That's way more down reverse engineering than I have ever gone down myself. But it's really fascinating, just overall, just to see how it works. Like I read the 0 Day book by Kim Zader, right?
Hmm.
And the way that she's able to explain how it worked and how it was reverse engineered has always fascinated me. That's actually the book that kind of like reinforced like I should go down the security route, right? Like I thought, just looking at the cover and reading the description of it, right? I thought this may be outside of my realm, right? I'm probably gonna get bored in 20 minutes. I will have wasted $20, right, on this book. I'm never gonna finish it, but I kept coming back for more. I couldn't put the book down. I was studying it even. And so I bring that up, right? Because fast forward to when I'm getting my master's in cybersecurity, and we have I think it was an offensive security class, right? And one of the projects was you have to pick a vulnerability on whatever platform you want. It had to be a mobile platform, and you have to exploit it and get root on the device, right? The goal is root. However you do it, doesn't matter. And so I figured, okay, like let's pick an iPhone. I'm using an iPhone. I've had terrible experience with Androids before because, I'll download, infected apps from the Google Play Store,
Hmm.
and that would really, just really grind my gears to no extent that I'm going to the Google Play Store. I'm going to your own Play Store and I'm downloading malware from an app. It's Facebook, right? At least to me, it looks like Facebook, and now I'm getting screwed because it's malware. So I started with iPhone, with a Bluetooth vulnerability. Could not get it after 26 hours of trying. I could not get it. The deadline is coming down, so I'm like, okay, let's quickly download this Android emulator and try and deploy it on there. 20 minutes later, I'm done. And that was like the most frustrating slash eye opening, thing that I've ever gone through is when you're going through these like different offensive security certs like OSCP and whatnot, they tell you just try harder, right? And I was trying really hard on the iPhone, and as soon as I switched to Android, it was like no effort. It was no effort whatsoever. And it was really interesting, that difference in difficulty. Now, I'm not saying iPhones are, completely secure and like the most secure device out there or whatnot, but it eliminates a lot of the variables, I feel. Is that something that maybe you've noticed as well? It's not an open platform. Like I can't roll my own iOS version
Hmm.
deployed on my device. That's not how that works. But with Android, I can deploy whatever I want on there.
A lot of people on Reddit, including myself, wish that iPhones allowed for Chrome extensions, uh, and also PWAs. These are portable web apps that you can like go to a website and say, "Hey, I want to install this Twitter app on my phone without going to the App Store." It sounds like a great idea. But when you think about it, it's essentially turning your phone into the Google Play Store. If you go to the Chrome extension store, it's the same thing. You could reverse engineer people's code, which is, I don't think, the best look. It's not a compiled language, the Chrome extensions, but we see the same thing on the Chrome extensions where someone buys a Chrome extension, like a very popular one, and then they turn it into malware. And Chrome doesn't know. And it's also harder to know because no one's auditing the code like they do in the App Store. So I think that it's way easier to exploit Android. It's just like Windows. Like Windows is a lot more open and also a lot more used. Until recently, I think Android was widely more used than iPhone. Naturally, attackers go for the biggest target. But now those things are changing a bit. Android is also becoming more secure. We're starting to sandbox a lot more features of our phones and computers. But yeah, I think that having a closed ecosystem makes it a lot harder. It's having a black box. It's a lot harder to break into a black box and having access to the code.
Right. Yeah. When I started to dive into like the OS architecture, right, of Android versus iPhone, and I get into this argument all the time with the same people in my friend group, and it's so frustrating because it's like, guys, I've literally looked at the architecture, like I have tested this, you know. But when you look at the architecture, they frame it in a way to where we're going to protect the user from the user as best as we possibly can. Like there's a reason why when you go to, an iOS root, service, not a service, but, an application or whatever it might be, they say it has to be a very specific version. It has to be on this version. You cannot potentially, sometimes you can't even like roll back from these newer versions onto that version.
Yeah.
And they have it like that for a very specific reason, because if you try to do it, on today's iOS version, right, that Safari extension exploit, let's just say that there's an extension in Safari that you can exploit. That Safari extension exploit is probably sandbox now. But if you go back 2 years ago, it probably isn't, and as soon as Apple saw it, they released one of those emergency, security patches that like just pushes to your phone immediately, and you have no choice but to install it, right? Like they really do a good job of protecting the user from the user.
Yeah. Sometimes we need to be protected from ourselves. When you think about who needs something jailbroken, it's like, you know what you're trying to do. You're trying to do something that you probably shouldn't be doing already. So, like with iPhone, you have to really think twice, 3 times, 4 times about, am I really about to put in the effort to do this action that I probably shouldn't be doing in the first place?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very valid point, and I've definitely gone down that rabbit hole myself. So after McAfee, I mean, like it sounds like you started like at the top, right? Where most security professionals like want to end up. You started there, and then you somehow graduated into reverse engineering, malware and different things like that, right? Where do you go from there?
So yeah, the next place that I went from there was Intel. I did a stint at McAfee working on like the endpoint protection side, and uh, pivoted over to Intel doing corporate security. So this is where I got my love for automation. I was working on the endpoint protection side at Intel. I was a cyber fusion engineer. And what this meant was, hey, we want you to take information from many different data sources and combine it together to give us intelligence. We want you to create cyber intelligence in the form of like our own IP and data sources, whether they be open, paid, or private. And what I didn't realize what I was doing was I was working in the SOAR space, security orchestration, automation, and response. And I loved it. Intel, though, they don't pay that well considering I moved to San Jose, California. Anyone that lives or has lived there, it is not cheap. If you want a 1-bedroom apartment, this was like 2017, 1-bedroom apartment in a good area was going to probably cost you like $2,000. So that's not fun. I'm only making so much. I think I was making about like 130 at the time. So $2,000 a month plus, all the other things that I'm dreaming of. I'm young, in my mid 20s. I'm young. I want to buy stuff. I want to go out. I want to travel. So I told myself I was going to do a year there and figure out where the big bucks are at. I didn't move all the way to California just to, work at Intel and, have a nice name. It was nice to have it on my resume, but I didn't move there for that. I moved there to strike gold because that's what you do in Silicon Valley. So I worked there for a year, and then I had the idea to go to Crunchbase. It's a website. I think it's owned by TechCrunch. I went to Crunchbase, and I don't know where I came up with this idea, but I bought a $40 subscription. It was $40 a month at that time. And I typed in, who are the companies that are in San Jose that have $30 million in funding, that have less than 50 employees, and that were founded within the past 3 years? And there was only like 10 companies that showed up. And I saw one of them that looked interesting was a company called Demisto. And Demisto was doing exactly what I was doing at Intel, but they were creating a cybersecurity product for it. So I applied, and they were caught off guard. They were very young in their stage. I think they had around 25 employees. They were like, how did you find us? Like, you work at Intel, like you should go apply for every other company, but you applied here. How'd you find us? And I told the co-founder how I found them. he was shocked. He was like, hold on one second. He left the room immediately. He grabbed the CEO. He said, hey, tell him what you just told me. So I told him the story of how I found them, and he was like, all right, you're our guy, you're hired. Just for that level of creative thinking. You want people like that around you that are going to think outside of the box. So I then pivoted, worked at the Misto, and this is where I got connections and I got opportunities, I got learnings, because I had to pretty much do what I was doing at Intel, but do it for many different organizations, fintech, healthcare. I even worked with Red Lobster. I didn't know that they invested in security so hard, but just had a lot of opportunity to, meet some really cool people across the country and, work on some crazy projects and try to automate things that typically don't work because there aren't APIs, but still trying to figure out a way around it.
Yeah, you about the other side of security, right? Or the other side of IT that IT professionals very rarely ever experience, right? And that's that vendor side. It's you're halfway, you're almost always halfway selling, either the solution, even if they already bought it, right? Like you're reselling it to them almost in a way, while you're also trying to solve problems that maybe your solution doesn't meet right now. And you have to, on the cuff, right, figure out how to solve those situations, those issues. And it's a very unique area to learn because, like you said, you're making a significant amount of contacts. I mean, probably every day you're on the phone with someone new. They're learning your name, you're learning their name. By the end of the week, maybe you had 3 calls with them about different issues, and
Mhm.
they're picking your brain and whatnot.
And getting upset sometimes too. That was
Yeah,
something that really helped me mature as a person was how to handle conflict. People would be mad at so mad at the product sometimes, especially during the early days, or if they just did something the wrong way and made a big oopsie. They need to cover it up because they don't want to lose their job. Someone has to take the blame, and I learned how to be that. Not necessarily the person that would take the blame, but the person that would share the responsibility and that burden. And that's a very important skill for anyone to have, is learning out how to share the burden of conflict. We all deal with that, especially in security. And I think in security, a lot of the times we like to be like, nope, not my fault. It was this person, this engineer over here, and then this stakeholder, they didn't work together, and that's why we had the breach. But this, helped me have a little bit of empathy and, be a little more impatient and meet people where they're at.
yeah. You kind of describe wordsmithing, right? I don't think I came up with the term, right? But when I was on the vendor side, I would very, very often, especially because I'm the technical SME, right? So when I'm on the call, I'm the technical SME for our solution. They never get a call with the engineers or the developers, of course. Like those, those people are not trained how to talk to, customers apparently, right? Um, and there was many times when you would have to, I'll give you one example. One company, they were testing out our E911 solution, right? And when you route it properly, it gives exact information to the distribution point that sends out the police officers if you need it, or the ambulance or whatever, right? And they're testing it out, but they were testing it out wrong. And so the first, couple times I told them, hey, this is incorrect. You need to stop how you're testing. You need to convert it to this other way, right? And you won't incur any charges, but you'll be able to test like you want to test. They did not listen to me at all. And they kept on testing the way that incurs a charge. And this is a national charge, right? This isn't a charge from my company just to charge. This
Yeah.
is a charge that we're getting hit with from a national organization that anyone in the country, if they dialed this number, would get charged.
Hmm.
And it's a small charge if you do it once. Most people just do it once and they're like, my bad,
Yep.
because it's $100 per. This company did it like 50 times within an hour, like
Mm.
they were testing, and I was seeing it live, and literally they would test one and I would send them an email. They'd hit, 2 more times because I couldn't like get to it fast enough, and I'd send them another, and I'm calling them and everything, right? And at the end of the month when they're hit with the bill, they're trying to get out of it. They're trying to say that I didn't do my job, that I didn't inform them properly and whatnot. And this is where that wordsmithing comes in, because it's like, hey, you know, I'm not going to throw you under the bus, but I'm kind of going to throw you under the bus. It's where you show them, the receipts and whatnot, right? But that's a very valuable, it's a very valuable skill. It's a very valuable experience, right? Because you have to understand how to, hold your own, right? How to do things properly, how to communicate effectively, while also not, pushing them under the bus, right? It's kind of just like the evidence of everything that already happened kind of pushed you under the bus, so to speak, right? It's probably a little bit too graphic for someone in the audience. Like I said something similar to someone at work, and they were like, "That's a little bit too, too, I guess, like picturesque for me to think about, Joe. Like, let's use a different slogan." I'm like, "Oh, okay, let's say you don't come into work tomorrow." Like what
And
what do we need to
a
know?
good way to look at it is another graphic one, but like you said, thrown under the bus. I'm not the one that could make a decision on what the company spends, and neither is that person that probably did the test. So it's a matter of helping escalate it, to lift that bus off of you and say, hey, I need to bring in the person that's going to be mad about these charges. So let's bring them in. Let's call your boss, let's call my sales rep, and let's get them on the phone together. This is out of our hands, but what we can work on together is fixing your testing flaw. Like, the testing flaw needs to change immediately, obviously. And then we'll escalate and we'll get the right people involved. But I think working at a vendor, I also learned my lane. I used to try to be rangy and try to do everything in cyber. Working at a vendor, I learned that if you give out your phone number, someone's going to call it when they get a number, when they're going to
Yeah.
get an issue. So I never give out my phone number anymore unless it's to like people that I have a personal connection with, just because I've been in the space where, it's a support portal now. If you give out your number to someone that you work with and that you're helping, even for like a mentor, I, as a mentor, I'm very careful giving out my number, because your job as a mentor is to help advise and guide someone. And I don't want that on I want my personal life, and part of it, at least personal and professional, to be at least somewhat separated. So I always tell people the best way to contact me is LinkedIn and email. And I would say the same for, like, working at a vendor. If someone were to go down that path, be very careful with what you agree to, and also be very careful with what you commit to, because that sets expectations. But if there's no expectation set, then you always have a way to alleviate issues.
Yeah, I feel like you just described customer obsession.
Yeah.
Like it's one of those Amazon like buzzwords, or what's
Hmm.
the key principles, right? But I feel like if you're really good on the vendor side, you understand customer obsession. Like it pains me when it literally pains me when a customer has an issue and we're not solving it for X reason. Like it truly bugs me to no extent. And like having that empathy, to be able to hear them out, to be able to, you know, feel the pain and the issues that they're going through, right? And try to be that advocate. I mean, it takes a certain, kind of person to be able to do that, and do that effectively as well, right? To actually make the progress that you need within the organization to not only, deliver for this one customer, but I guarantee you there's 1,000 other customers out there, or 1,000 other
Hmm.
potential companies that you could say, oh, we already solved this issue for you. It's a game changer, really, in my opinion. From Demisto, how do you start Hacker Valley? Where do you like? I'm always fascinated, right? Where when I bring on other podcasters, which you have pivoted into a very, even a unique area that I didn't even think of before, right? It's like, what made you want to go down this route?
I've always loved being creative, and I got my start in cyber because I was working at a public access channel, and I was doing some YouTube videos. I had just met my wife around the time that I started to create videos in general. And my wife, she's a physical therapist by trade, and she has a company as well doing physical therapy. She was doing Instagram lives for 30 days. So she's like, I'm doing this 30-day challenge. And this was right as we met. So I was like, you know what? I really like this girl. If she's out here doing 30-day challenges, so should I. So I went live on YouTube for 30 days. And this was like right when the YouTube live streaming feature just came out. So I started doing that. And then Chris happened to jump on one of my lives, Chris Cochran, who's helped me co-found Hacker Valley. He jumped on one of the lives and he hit me up afterwards, and we used to work together. He said, hey, like, I really like those live streams. And Chris was doing these workout videos on Instagram, and I was like, I really like your Instagram videos. A few months go by and he gets a job offer at Netflix, and he has to move to the Bay Area. He moved to San Jose, and he said, hey, I'm going to be in San Jose, and my family, my kids are going to finish up their school year. Could I stay with you until they finish? I heard you have this hacker mansion on your live stream. Me and my friend Marco, who was one of my mentors, we got a hacker mansion. We're like, we're going to build, we set an intention. We're like, we're going to have a hacker house. There's these programmers that had these programming houses. Like, we're going to have a hacker house. So we rented a like 5,000 square foot home in San Jose, just two guys. And then boom, Chris shows up. He wants to move in for 3 months. And during that time, we're all going through personal growth journeys. It's very rare that three adult men live in a house together without specific circumstances bringing them there. Me and Chris, I'm still doing my YouTube live streams. And then Chris says, hey, let's do one together. And we jump on, and usually I was doing like tutorials. We jumped on and we just had a conversation about cybersecurity alchemy, how to transform seemingly invaluable data to valuable data. And that was, little did I know, I thought we were doing a YouTube channel. Little did I know we were creating a podcast. So we just kept doing it every week. And then we decided to create a podcast page, and then we were off to the races and started doing it. And we decided to start inviting other people because we wanted to speak to cool people in the space. So we started to, bring on people that we never would have had access to. Vendors started to see that and say, hold on a second, Hacker Valley, we saw that this person from Netflix was on your podcast as a guest. We want to put our brand on there. Can we get an ad slot? So we didn't know how to handle that. And then one of our other friends who worked at Palo Alto Networks with me after Demisto got bought by Palo Alto Networks, he comes on, he says, I love working with young entrepreneurs. And we were like, my gosh, we didn't even know we were building a business. So we immediately called up the bank and got an account, or a checking account. And then we were able to secure a sponsor that, reached out to us about sponsorship. Chris has a gift. He is low-key one of the best salespeople I've ever met, in the cyberspace especially, because he makes sales not about selling, but about helping other people out. That's Chris's motto. That's the name of the game. And, like, a little bit about me is also that customer obsession attribute. So together, we just made like a powerhouse of doing cool content on the podcast side. And then we pivoted into being a full-blown creative media agency where we not only create podcasts, but we also create a wide variety of content, whether it be company stories, commercials, internet series, and anything that someone could dream of. But we bring in a unique spin. Like, if you go and try to apply music to a lot of things, the music is not going to sound good. It's going to sound like elevator music or predictable stock music. So one of my specialties, I would say, is like finding like awesome music that fits a vibe and that really helps tell a story in the way that you want to tell it. So yeah, we just started as speaking on microphones and talking to one another, and then just kept iterating, and we'll see where it goes. Right now it's a creative media agency. One day I think it will be something different, and I'm open to the transformation as it comes.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I always tell other people that I talk about with regarding my podcast, right, is that the biggest benefit, right, is that it opened the door for so many other opportunities just by talking to different people, right?
Mm-hmm.
Opportunities that I never ever would have had, never would have known about or anything like that, and that's the biggest thing, when you take that jump into something new, you don't need to know everything right from the start, right? You mentioned, companies wanted to start, taking out ad space and whatnot. You had no clue how to handle that, right? And same thing with me, right? When I got my first sponsor, I had no clue how to handle that. I had to ask them what they were talking about because I couldn't process the word. Like, what?
Yeah.
You're gonna give me money for what? Like what's the trick here?
Yeah.
But when you put yourself out there, when you take that maybe that one little unknown task and you start diving into it and pressing in and you just take it day by day, something really special actually comes out of it. And I don't think I've told you this before, but I've been watching, Hacker Valley since the start, right? And you guys have really encouraged me in ways that are, not direct, but you have encouraged me to keep going. Like I question if I should be doing this podcast. Every once in a while I question it. I'm like, man, am I even making a difference? Am I providing value? And you guys have definitely encouraged me in different ways to keep going, to keep pushing through, right? To keep trying. It's a fantastic journey, and Ron, I know we're at time. I apologize for going a little bit over.
Oh,
But
good.
this has been a fantastic conversation.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I would love to have you on my show. And yeah, it's been an honor and a pleasure to, get to know you over this past year or two.
Yeah, absolutely, Ron. Whenever you want me on, I'm more than happy to make it happen. Well, Ron, before I let you go, how about you tell my audience, where they can find you if they wanted to reach out and connect, and where they can find Hacker Valley if they've been living under a rock and they don't know.
Yeah, so our website is hackervalley.com. All of our podcasts are there. Probably the best place to follow the content though is YouTube. It's just youtube.com/at Hacker Valley Media. And LinkedIn. LinkedIn's a great way to stay in touch, not just from like an external perspective, but if there's ever a piece of content that you want to see Hacker Valley produce or you just want to say hi, that's the best place.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Ron, and thanks everyone for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. Thanks, everyone.